Hi, I'm Rowan. I'm 17, and 2 weeks ago, I watched my best friend get suspended for speaking English during third period. We didn't even realize it was a rule until he got pulled out of class. It started when our school launched a new cognitive literacy program that, according to the principal, would prepare students for the linguistic demands of the future. That's how they described it. Corporate-sounding nonsense, but we all shrugged. Schools had weird electives all the time. Except this wasn't just an elective. Monday morning, we were told to report to third period. Cognates and structures. Instead of our usual classes. None of us knew what that meant. The hallway was a maze of new signage, some kind of stylized language that didn't match anything we'd seen before. At first, we thought it was some obscure Latin offshoot, or maybe a logic-based artificial dialect like Esperanto. But it didn't translate. Inside the classroom, a tall man in a gray jacket who wasn't on staff last week stood in front of the board writing in symbols that looked like a fusion of letters and equations. "This is Noaric," he said. "You will speak it. You will think in it." The entire class laughed like we were on some prank show. The guy didn't blink. Just handed out thick spiral-bound workbooks, each labeled Phase 1, Operant Patterns. I flipped mine open. The first page didn't even say, "Welcome," or give an index. It was a wall of unfamiliar glyphs with phonetic transcriptions. Below them, Day 1 fluency required. I raised my hand. "What language is this actually? Like, where's it from?" The teacher tilted his head like I'd asked why chairs exist. "Noaric is not from," he said slowly. "It is for." "For what?" I asked. But he'd already moved on, drilling us into sounds, sharp syllables, repetition heavy, almost rhythmic. The weird part? It worked. The entire class was speaking back within 10 minutes like we'd done this before. By the end of the week, kids were holding actual conversations in Noaric between classes. I watched a sophomore order lunch using only 2 glyphs and a hand gesture. The lunch lady understood him. She didn't even blink. The following Monday, new rules appeared in the student handbook buried in the app, not sent home, stating that third period was now an immersion-only learning zone, and that use of outside languages during instruction would result in progressive disciplinary action. That was the day Micah got pulled out of class for asking what time it was. In English. No warning. No second chance. And when I asked the new teacher if we could appeal the rule, he looked me in the eye and said, "Appeals imply choice." That was the moment I knew something was seriously wrong. By Friday, they had replaced the regular announcements with short Noaric updates. You'd be sitting in homeroom and the speakers would crackle to life. "Civilcom Notar Phase 3 begins at midwave." Then the bell would ring like nothing happened. Nobody explained what midwave meant. I think we were supposed to just figure it out. The guidance office was no help either. When I asked Mrs. Kern why our schedules were replaced with color-coded glyph blocks, she smiled vaguely and said, "It's part of the transition model." When I pressed further, she handed me a brochure with more of the same symbols, no English, no explanation, and pointed at the phrase printed on the back. "Adaptation precedes comprehension." I wanted to throw it at a wall. At home, I showed the new workbook to my older sister, who's a linguistics grad student. She stared at the glyphs for a solid minute before going, "This isn't a natural language. It's engineered. There's no lexical redundancy." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means it's not designed for culture or nuance. It's designed for speed and control." She scanned a few more pages, then narrowed her eyes. "Rowan, this feels like it's training you to respond, not to think." I took that in silence, then asked if she could find anything online. She tried. We looked for the word Noaric across search engines, language databases, even obscure constructed language wikis. Nothing. Not one hit. It didn't exist anywhere. No roots, no etymology, no phonetic ancestry. Then she searched the school district's site for curriculum updates and hit a dead end, just a vague line item. Pilot Cognition Pathways Initiative, External Vendor Partnership. No vendor name. No board vote record. No parent letters. That same night, she filed a FOIA request on my behalf. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Kids weren't just learning the language. They were changing because of it. Micah, the friend who got suspended? He came back to school a week later, quieter, more focused. We met up after school and I asked if he was okay. He blinked slowly and said, "It's clearer now. I get it. You will too." I didn't. because I couldn't stop seeing what was happening around us. By the start of week 4, Noeric symbols were on every whiteboard in the school. The main office had a reception pattern sign in place of the usual welcome. The bathroom pass? A single glyph, black lozenge. Every teacher in third period had been replaced by someone new. And I saw one of them in the staff parking lot wearing a badge that didn't say school district employee. It said, Observational Phase Technician. That weekend I snuck back into school. The district locks are pathetic one-swipe card, easily borrowed if you hang around the janitor's closet long enough. My plan was simple: photograph everything in the Noeric classrooms before Monday, send it all to my sister, and finally prove this wasn't a pilot program. It was something else. The air inside felt wrong. Not cold, not warm, just thick, like the whole building was breathing slower than usual. Every hallway hummed faintly, a low frequency that wasn't quite sound but made my chest vibrate. When I reached room 312, the main immersion lab, the lights were already on. Someone was inside. I pressed myself against the door window and saw one of the new instructors standing at the front of the room, writing those symbols across the digital board. Only they weren't static this time. The shapes shifted like liquid geometry, rearranging themselves while he whispered in perfect Noeric rhythm. The students' workbooks on the desks glowed faintly, pages rippling with reflected light. He wasn't teaching. He was programming. Then I heard it. A single phrase repeated like a chant. Neuer and Zurich. Neuer and Zurich. I didn't know what it meant, but the longer I listened, the heavier my thoughts felt. Like my mind was being gently pulled toward the rhythm. I had to look away, force myself to back out into the hallway. That's when the janitor caught me. Shouldn't be here, he said. His voice had that slow Noeric cadence. They're calibrating. Calibrating what? I asked. He hesitated just long enough to scare me. The thinking grid. Before I could ask anything else, the door behind him opened. The instructor from room 312 stepped out, perfectly calm, eyes pale gray like he'd been staring into static. Rowan, he said evenly. You shouldn't resist the transition. It only hurts at the edges. How do you know my name? He smiled faintly. All students are known. I ran. Didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away, lungs burning, phone camera still recording from my jacket pocket. I played the footage later, blurry, shaky, but you can still hear his voice saying it. All students are known. When I sent the clip to my sister, she didn't respond for hours. Then finally. Rowan. Don't go back Monday. Something's very wrong. I just got the FOIA results. The vendor listed isn't an education company. It's a defense contractor. Monday morning, I didn't go to school. I didn't even pretend. I sat at the kitchen table in my hoodie with my laptop open and the blinds half closed while my mom paced the living room on a work call, oblivious. I could still feel that strange heaviness in my chest from Saturday night, like I'd inhaled some kind of low-frequency fog and parts of it hadn't left. My sister called at 9:07. I read the documents. She said, the company running the Noeric program? It's called Dextracog Solutions. They mostly build neurocognitive modeling software for simulation training. Simulation for who? I asked. Not schools. She took a shaky breath. Rowan, their last contract was with a military research group studying language processing under stress. They were designing field communication systems for environments with high cognitive disruption. Like war zones. Or space. I froze. This program wasn't built for learning, she said. It was built for compliance. That same hour, the district issued a push notification to all students' devices. Due to an increase in unauthorized absences during Phase 3 integration, students not present for Noeric immersion may receive behavioral evaluations or schedule adjustments. Schedule adjustments. I checked our school's app. My third period was no longer labeled cognitive literacy. It just showed a single glyph I'd never seen before, a loop spiral with a red outline pulsing faintly. I forwarded the screenshot to my sister. She didn't reply for 5 full minutes. Then, they're marking you. Tracking non-conversion rates. That symbol? It's probably not a schedule update. It's a classification. I slammed the laptop shut and went upstairs to lie on the floor, staring at the ceiling, trying to stay grounded in reality. I didn't know if I was being paranoid or just finally catching up to what had been happening since week 1. That afternoon, I got a text from Micah. You're making it harder than it has to be. They can help. You just have to let go. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. He used to send me memes. Now it was cryptic recruitment texts like he joined a cult that met in the language lab. I needed to know how deep it went. So that night, I logged back into the school network using an admin login my sister had scraped from cached pages in the FOIA dump. What I found wasn't a language program. It was a cognitive compliance trial. The internal files weren't labeled by subject or semester, they were labeled by uptake tier, neural latency response, and pattern deviation thresholds. There were charts tracking which students began dreaming in Noyaric, who resisted, and who plateaued in Phase 3. My name was in a file called Edge Resistors. Next to it, a recommendation. Escalate exposure. Evaluate for override pattern 5. Override. Like I was a setting they could switch. I sat there for an hour rereading that line, unable to breathe properly. That's when I realized something even worse. Micah's suspension hadn't been punishment. It had been reprogramming. By Tuesday, my mom had noticed. "Rowan, why aren't you going to school?" she asked while I pretended to stir cereal. I told her my stomach hurt, but she saw my hands shaking. My sister had told me not to tell her anything yet until she could verify more, but I couldn't keep quiet anymore. "They're not teaching us a language," I said. "They're testing something on us." She blinked like I told her aliens replaced the cafeteria staff. "Sweetie, if this is about your grades." "It's not grades," I snapped. "It's DextraCog Solutions. They're running experiments on how fast our brains can form compliance patterns through language immersion. The teachers aren't teachers, they're technicians." Her voice hardened. "Where did you hear that?" "I saw it. In their files. My name's in a list." She sighed and rubbed her temples, muttering about internet rumors. The truth was too absurd to sound sane. But that afternoon, when she checked her email, everything shifted. A message had gone out to all parents, simple, corporate, terrifying. Notice, program expansion approved. Beginning next week, all grade levels will enter Phase 4 integration. Families are encouraged to reinforce home immersion for optimal cognitive efficiency. There were pronunciation guides attached. My mom's lips moved as she read them, softly repeating the syllables like she was trying to understand. And then she blinked just once, too slow, too blank. "Mom?" I said. She didn't answer for a second too long. Then smiled faintly. "It's easier than I expected." The sound of her voice made my skin crawl. That night, I heard her in the kitchen humming something under her breath, a rhythm that matched the one the teacher used in the calibration room. I went to my sister's apartment at dawn with a backpack of clothes and the flash drive I'd copied from the school's server. She'd been up all night analyzing the files. "Rowan," she said, eyes red from staring at her screen, "this isn't localized anymore. DextraCog launched this exact curriculum in 12 districts across the country, same glyphs, same pacing. They're scaling it." "Scaling what?" She hesitated. "The restructuring of linguistic cognition. Noyaric isn't just a language, it's an operating system for thought. The grammar's built to suppress ambiguity. Once you're fluent, your brain can't form questions that don't fit its logic grid. So it's permanent? Maybe. Maybe not. But every test file ends with the same line." She turned her monitor toward me. "Cognitive interference resolved. Subject synchronized with core lexicon." She looked up at me, her voice shaking. "They're not teaching kids how to speak, Rowan. They're teaching them how to stop asking why." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I wasn't tired, but because I was scared of what I'd dream in. My sister had said once you cross a certain fluency threshold, your inner monologue stops defaulting to your native language. And I'd already noticed it happening. During breakfast that morning, I reached for the sugar and thought the word Vetric before I corrected myself. Vetric wasn't English. It meant small request token in Noyaric. I hadn't memorized that. I just knew it. Something had rewired. But worse than that, something was still rewiring. I needed to warn someone. Not a teacher. Not a guidance counselor. Not my principal, especially not him. I needed someone outside the system. So I messaged Micah's older brother, Liam, who graduated 2 years ago and now worked at a local news station running camera equipment. I didn't know him well, but I remembered him from theater crew, and I figured he might at least believe I wasn't insane. He replied 20 minutes later. "I heard rumors about that program. You serious it's this bad?" I sent him the files. All of them. 10 minutes later. "Meet me tonight. Off school property. Bring everything." We met in a parking lot behind a strip mall no one went to anymore. I handed him the flash drive and watched his face change as he scrolled. "These aren't lesson plans," he said. "This is biometric feedback data. They're measuring language-induced compliance spikes." Then he said something that chilled me. "This is like behaviorist training. But linguistic. They're not teaching kids, they're conditioning them." He promised to get the materials to a contact at the station and told me to lay low. But when I got home, my phone buzzed with a new notification from the school app. Language recall proficiency updated. Subject RWN. Reassessment scheduled Thursday. Subject. Not student. Not name. Just RWN. That was the moment I realized the app wasn't just tracking my assignments. It was tracking me. Every interaction, every misphrase, every resistance note. I'd been marked for reassessment, and I didn't even know what that meant. But Micah had gotten reassessed. And when he came back, he wasn't the same. My sister took one look at the alert and said, "You're not going." So she did something I'll never forget. She packed up her car that night, laptop, hard drives, backup batteries, printed records, and said, "We're driving to the state office in the capital. If the local media won't take this, maybe a state legislator will." We left before sunrise. 6 hours later, we were standing in the reception area of the State Board of Education building, waiting for someone, anyone, to take us seriously. And that's when a man in a gray blazer stepped out of the elevator, glanced at our folder of glyph-covered documents, and smiled. Not like he was surprised to see them. Like he'd been expecting us. He walked straight toward us, hands relaxed at his sides, the kind of ease that made my stomach knot. "Rowan Avery," he said, pronouncing my name in crisp, almost mechanical syllables. "And Olivia. You've traveled far." We hadn't introduced ourselves. We hadn't signed in. My sister took a half step in front of me. "Who are you?" He offered a card. It didn't have a title. Just the name Dr. Leon Kurth and a logo that matched the watermark I'd seen on the internal Noeric files, a black spiral inside a gray square. "I'm with Cognitive Integrations," he said. "DextraCog's educational research partner." I didn't take the card. "We're here to report unauthorized experimentation on minors," Olivia said. "You can't make a research program look like a curriculum without going through IRB and parental consent channels. We have documentation." He nodded. "I've reviewed your file." Her voice caught. "Our what?" "You've submitted excellent documentation," he said calmly. "Your insights into language-induced pattern shifts are promising." I wanted to bolt. Every instinct in my body screamed that this wasn't a meeting. It was a check-in. A containment. "You're not with the Department of Education, are you?" I asked. He smiled. "Oversight structures are evolving." Then he motioned down the hallway. "If you'll come with me, we can discuss Phase 4 in more appropriate detail." Olivia stepped back. "We're not going anywhere." The receptionist, who hadn't spoken since we entered, stood abruptly and locked the front door. No one else in the waiting room flinched. That's when I realized there were no other people in the waiting room. Just individuals seated strategically, spaced out too evenly, all wearing neutral-colored clothing. None of them had phones out. None of them blinked. They were watching us. My sister turned to me. "Run." We didn't think. We just moved. She grabbed the folder. I slammed the card down on the desk. The door was locked, but the emergency exit to the stairwell wasn't. We hit it hard, the alarm blaring behind us, our footsteps echoing through concrete. 5 floors. Down. Out the side exit. Into the city. We ran until our legs failed. We didn't stop until we were inside a bus station bathroom, shaking, both of us breathless and sweating. "I don't think they're trying to hide it anymore," I said. Olivia nodded. "I don't think they ever were." She opened her laptop, connected to a mobile hotspot, and sent every document, every audio file, every scan to 3 education watchdogs, 1 investigative podcast, and the ACLU. Then she looked at me and said, "We're not fighting a curriculum, Rowan. We're fighting infrastructure." That night, we stayed in a motel under a fake name. The TV in the lobby played a local news clip. The school board had just announced mandatory home integration modules for all students in our district. The Noeric glyphs were on the screen behind the superintendent. The anchor read them aloud like they were perfectly normal. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a pilot anymore. It was the launch. The town changed in a week. Storefronts replaced their open signs with glyphs. The public library closed. For restructuring. Road signs on Main Street were repainted with dual language symbols, English above, Noeric below. Some only had the latter. No one questioned it. Parents nodded along at PTA meetings where half the presentation was delivered in a language that didn't exist 6 months ago. Teachers who once rolled their eyes at district trends now spoke and clipped Noeric phrases with perfect pronunciation and blank expressions. And the kids? They weren't resisting anymore. They were excelling. The top students weren't the ones with the best grades, they were the ones who didn't speak English at all anymore. Their inner monologues had shifted entirely. Micah passed me in the grocery store and didn't say hi. He just placed a hand over his chest, palm down, fingers splayed, one of the Noeric gestures for I recognize alignment. My mom got an email from the district asking her to confirm familial synchronization. She showed it to me like it was just a routine form. She doesn't ask about my sister anymore. Olivia and I never went home. We're not fugitives, not exactly. Just elsewhere. We've been couch hopping across cities, staying with old friends of hers from grad school. People who still know how to ask the right questions. People who still think in questions at all. 3 days ago, we got a hit. One of the investigative outlets Olivia contacted ran a story. It wasn't the full expose we hoped for, but it was something. The headline was simple. Is a new language quietly rewiring your child's brain? They didn't name DextraCog. They didn't mention Noeric. But they cited an unnamed language program in several districts, and included a blurred screenshot of a glyph I recognized from the earliest drills. The comments section was flooded with angry parents, some outraged, some dismissive. But a few were like us. One reply simply said, "My son stopped dreaming in English. We're still gathering names, stories, evidence. The resistance isn't loud, and it can't be, not yet. But it's growing. And me? I still hear Noeric in the back of my mind sometimes. Still dream in it. Still catch myself mid-sentence translating back into English, like my own thoughts aren't native anymore. But I keep my notebooks. I write everything down in ink, in English, in full sentences with messy grammar and contradictory thoughts. Because ambiguity is a gift. I don't know what happens next. But I know this. We haven't lost yet. We're just between phases.